Hi, welcome to this episode of the Digital Access Show. Now, as we've gone along the last 60 plus episode, you've heard me talk about screen readers, you've heard me talk about braille devices, puff and sip tools, lots of different tools that are assistive technology tools that are used by the disability community to read information. Today, I've actually brought on a guest works who's involved with the non-visual desktop access screen reader, NVDA for short. The reason I've brought him on is, I do think it's a tool that developers should become aware of, should know what the use is for, and learn a little bit about how to use it themselves. It's a good testing tool. Quentin Christensen from NV Access Online, thank you.
Narelle, thank you for having me, and hi everybody.
Quentin, can you tell us a bit about yourself? What you do,
Sure,
where you're from?
I can. So I have been with NV Access for 10 years now. Um, Before that, I was an assistive technology trainer. So I taught people to use um, both screen readers and magnification and other things as well. Um, with one of the major blindness organizations. So now I specialize just in NVDA, and I've been writing training material, working with users, doing a lot of our communications. If you read our blog or our emails,
Yeah.
they're probably written by me, um, and answer a lot of questions and do things like talk to Narelle.
Quentin, obviously, I use NVDA all the time. I have a severe vision impairment. I am about 90% reliant on it.
Mhm.
Can you explain to people exactly what NVDA is and why it was built? What was the hole it's there to plug?
Absolutely. So NVDA is a screen reader, which is a
Mhm.
program that will basically read out everything on the computer aloud to someone who is blind and can't read it visually on the screen. NVDA will also work with, if you've got a refreshable braille display, you can have it read out or put the information there so you can read it in braille as well.
Yeah, why? I know the story behind it, but could you tell everyone else why, Jamie and Nick, where it was developed and why it was developed? Because I actually find this a very interesting story. I really love it.
Absolutely. So Mick and Jamie met at university or met before university at a before then actually. They decided to that the cost of traditional screen readers, so NVDA is not the only screen reader, but the
Mm.
cost of traditional commercial screen readers these days can be $2,000 or more, uh,
Yeah.
which is quite prohibitive, particularly not even just here in Australia. Here in Australia, that's quite a lot of money, but in developing countries, in the Pacific, in Vietnam, in Africa, um, people wouldn't see $2,000 in, years. So uh, that just left that completely out of reach of them. So they wanted to see what they could do to develop an option that wouldn't put such a financial burden on the end user, and also just to see how far they could get with something that was free. And at the time they weren't sure. And here
Yeah.
we are 20 years later. So
Yeah.
NVDA was first developed in 2006. And the first main version and NV Access itself as an organization to support that in early 2007. So um, NVDA is free, is basically our main point of difference to any other screen readers. It and it was developed like that from the outset. So a lot of people ask us how do you make it free? If other screen readers can cost $2,000, how is yours free? And the reason is that we set out, or Mick and Jamie set out to do that from the outset. So we have partnerships with some of the big tech organizations, Google, Microsoft, Adobe, and so on, who help fund what we do. And in return, we give them advice on how to make their products more accessible. So that ends up a win-win for everybody. even if you
Yeah.
don't use NVDA.
Yeah, that's something I didn't realize that you were in partnership with all those companies.
Mm.
And the other thing that I don't think people realize is the actual way NVDA works. Because when you look at a document, a Word document, when you're reading it visually, that's one way, but NVDA doesn't work like that. NVDA actually reads the code behind, doesn't it? And translates it to make sense.
That's right. That's right. So if you're
Mm,
reading a Word document, it's not so different, and your
mm,
experience will be pretty similar as someone using a screen reader compared to someone reading it visually. And we
yeah,
also make sure that, for instance, NVDA has a command to say all or to read from the current point
yeah,
onwards. And if you do that as the document scrolls and as NVDA reads further down, we make sure that it does scroll so it
mm,
does keep up for sighted users as well. Um,
yeah,
where it has traditionally been quite different, and I'm pleased to say that we are working on things to mitigate this, but where it has traditionally been different is the web. So,
yeah,
um, you might know the web is often built on most web pages are built on,
mm,
HTML. Um,
yes,
and then, you use CSS and other things to style it and make it look how you want. NVDA reads, and screen readers in general, read
mm,
that underlying HTML code and know that here's a paragraph of text.
yeah,
So where it's been tricky is, there's your paragraph of text, but we don't know that the CSS has styled that so that that actually is one very long, narrow column
mm,
or one very wide um,
yeah,
piece of text. So that's always been tricky. Um, excuse me. But we have tried to introduce a few more features to make that a bit easier to manage for people, particularly our sighted and
mm,
partially sighted users. We know that actually only a small percentage of people are completely blind.
mm,
Most people who, and even people who identify as blind, have some vision that may or may not be usable to work, with a computer to read things visually or to use magnification, but in some cases it is. So we want to allow people to make the most of every way they've got of accessing that information.
yeah. And this is it because for me, as a developer myself, I wrote code for many years. And some of the techniques that you use for websites and things like that, they work well, they work great for a person with vision.
Yeah.
Now, you could hide an object, whatever, but NVDA, these screen readers, any assistive technology tool, generally will pick up those pieces of information that you want hidden. And it really distorts the message that you're getting via screen readers. That's why I want to talk to you because
Mhm.
as a developer, one of the things we are told is to test, test, test. And
Yeah.
you test for every variable that you can think of. Most developers today don't test for a person without vision or a person
Mhm.
with dyslexia or a person with color blindness, these things. The NVDA tool is the tool that I'm actually saying to people go and get it, test it.
Yeah.
What are you hearing? Is it matching up with what's on the screen? That's where I think NVDA's got a great use as well. What are your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that we do get feedback on is that NVDA doesn't try and interpret everything
Mm,
and go, I know what that means. I'm going to tell you this, when that's not actually what was written on screen on the
yeah.
page at all. Um, and there are times when that can be useful, but there are also times when that can be less useful. I know a couple of the synthesizers, Microsoft have done this a couple of times
Mm,
to us recently, where there was one example where it would read CUPS and go, I know what
yep.
that is. That's Cuban pesos, which was great if you were reading currency information, not so good if you were trying to read a recipe. So, uh,
Yeah.
so we've always made sure that NVDA doesn't make those assumptions, and you can put things in that do. if you
Yep.
want. But yeah, in general, it doesn't. So you know when you're testing something that it will tell you, what it should tell you.
Yeah.
And um, if that's not clear, if you've written cups and that's not clear what it's supposed to mean, maybe that goes back to the design of what you're writing, and that should be clearer rather than relying on a screen reader or something to try and interpret that.
Yeah, I know one of the ones that I get the giggles every time is you'll see a capital U and a capital S, and it's always read US, always, where really they're wanting you to say us. And that just comes back to the way that NVDA or any screen reader is interpreting those two letters together. And it is such a big issue because it actually changes the meaning of what you're talking about.
Mm.
That's
It-
the value of using testing with a screen reader.
yep, yep. And that's one of those things that can be worth knowing as well when you're testing
Mm,
that you've written, us, and for whatever reason
yeah,
you're writing a sentence in capitals, you've written it that way, and yeah, visually you look at it, it looks fine.
yep,
Um,
yeah.
and then yeah, it's not until you actually test that with a screen. I don't think there's any standard that's going to tell you to look out for that until you actually test it or have somebody test it to pick up on that.
That's it. What are some other things that NVDA is really useful for developers, coders, designers?
Mhm. So a few other tools that we've got in NVDA that will help developers and designers and testers and things is particularly sighted developers. We've got things like Focus Highlight, which will draw a border around whatever currently has focus.
Yeah,
So that can help orient you visually where NVDA is reading. We
yeah,
have things like the speech viewer.
mm,
So we know particularly if you've ever listened to somebody who's a proficient screen reader user, how unintelligible, NVDA or any screen reader can
mm,
be at hundreds of words per minute.
yep,
We were fortunate enough to be on Australian Story a couple of years ago by the ABC, and that one of the little snippets that they took and made a separate piece out of was Jamie Tay, one of our founders, reading at 900 words per minute,
yeah.
uh, which is much faster than many sighted people can read visually. So, um, coming back to developers, yeah, one of the things we have is a speech viewer that will print everything that NVDA reads into a window that you can read on screen.
Ah,
Or copy if you
that's
need
it.
to. Copying some of
Yep.
that information can be useful to go back and say, no, this is what's being read, and this is exactly what's being read because it came out of NVDA itself.
Yeah, and that's actually going to highlight errors for the developers, for the designers as well. Well, hang on, NVDA is reading the code. So what have
Yep,
we done in the code that's causing that issue, or the design itself? And don't
exactly.
forget, for people out there, NVDA doesn't care about color. It
No,
makes
no.
no difference, color or images that are not don't have alternate text. It doesn't care.
That's right. You can set it, just a small point, you can set
Mm,
NVDA to tell you about changes in color in text.
yeah,
But again, if you're looking at WCAG or anything like that, they
mm,
will also tell you you shouldn't be relying on color alone to convey
yeah.
information. Um, One other thing that NVDA can do that also meets up with the WCAG criteria that I can't recall the number of off my
Mm,
offhand, but because the web is often used, quite mouse driven
mm,
originally, keyboard users and screen reader users need to have other ways of accessing things. So one of the things we have is the elements list
yeah.
in VDA F7, which will bring up a list of initially all the links on a web page, just in
Mm,
order, a big list of links, and what text is used to identify those. That can be really useful for, you'll very quickly see. I've got a whole page of links there that just say click here. Um, and that's not the best way of identifying links. If you can't tell what a link is from that list, maybe it needs to be, identified a little bit better in the context of the document itself.
Yeah,
Uh,
because
but
WCAG does state, the link name has to be understandable and tell you where you're
mm,
going to and use 5 words or less. Because, I often run into that. Learn more, click here. I like the one I saw a couple of days ago, button. I just kept getting button, button, button. I'm thinking, yeah, but what's the button going to do? It doesn't tell me. So if NVDA sees, reads out to me button, I don't touch it. I don't know what it's going to do.
yep,
What is in the future for NVDA?
absolutely. So we've got a couple of things. I had something in mind that's gone completely out of mind that we added recently that I was thinking, oh, your developers might be interested in that,
Yeah.
and it's gone right out of mind. Um,
Mm.
but one feature that is now available, which might be useful to developers, is previously when you're on the web, if you hold down Shift and press the down arrow a couple of times to select a couple of lines of text, NVDA would select that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't show anything on screen, but it would select it. And when you copied it and paste it into, say, a Word document or an email, what it will give you is just the plain text,
Mm.
not any formatting, not any headings, not any images, anything like that that you might have selected, just the plain
Yeah.
text. What we can do now is last year it was we introduced what we called native selection mode,
Ooh,
which let you select exactly what was on the web page, what was presented, how it was presented, and copy that.
nice.
Initially, that was just in Firefox. Now we've also brought that to Chrome, Chromium, Edge, etc. So what we're probably going to do shortly is make that the default because that's what a lot of people expect. So that will then line back up with what, developers might be expecting, users might be expecting.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that
that's
actually that's a good one because I get frustrated actually because when I'm copying something and I think, okay, that'll give my headings, I can copy it, put it in a document and keep going. And then you've got to go
yes,
reformat it. And as a person with a vision impairment, I've got my documents set up to easy do it. But it's just one extra job that it'd be nice I don't have to do. So yeah, that's a good
e-
one.
exactly. And the other thing with that a lot of people who are sighted, who use M or partially sighted or fully sighted who use NVDA, is if you select something on a web page with the mouse.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
can, click and drag to select things. NVDA wouldn't recognize that. And you'd
Oh,
select it and press Control C, it wouldn't
yeah,
copy it because it wasn't in NVDA's buffer. With
yeah.
native selection mode, that will work now.
Fantastic.
In the meantime, if you do need to do that, right click and choose copy from there.
Copy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Quentin, we've talked about testing and a couple of things within NVDA and the tools can be used. What are the really good pieces of advice, takeaways for developers, for designers in testing with NVDA,
Mhm.
other than just do it?
Yep, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I think what I often come back to is the really, I'm going to say simple things, and that's not to say they're
Mm,
simple, but the sort of key things um, are, can you get, and this is perhaps more for standalone programs rather than web
mm,
pages, but can you get everywhere you need to with the keyboard? Um,
yeah,
in a program itself, if you can't get everywhere with the keyboard, it doesn't matter what NVDA can do, it's not going to be able to do it. Um,
yeah,
and have you got things linked to, if you've got an image, does it have
mm,
alternate text? If you've got a button, is it identified as anything other than button? Um,
yeah,
Everything provides, whether it's the web or whether it's, a program you're writing in,
Mm.
something else. Everything provides a way of linking those labels and giving that information. So do make sure you use that. Um, and if you want a button, then first of all, use a button. Can you use a button, one of the default defined
Yeah,
buttons, rather than going off and creating something yourself from scratch? That that button that you styled yourself and made out of nothing is beautiful, but did you also include all the accessibility stuff to make it work? Um,
that's actually a good point.
yeah, yeah. If you can use an out-of-the-box component, it's usually comes with all that accessibility stuff behind the scenes, so you don't need to do any extra work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quentin, how can people keep in contact with you? Because if they want to find out more about NVDA, talk to you, what's the best way of contacting you?
Yep, absolutely. So our website is nvaccess.org, and pretty much everything flows from there, our social medias and
Yeah.
so on,
Mm.
at NV Access and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a one thing we brought in last year. We've got a mailing list now, finally.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
you can subscribe, and if you only want to hear when we release a new version of NVDA, you can subscribe just to that. Or you
Yeah.
can get our, fortnightly blog,
Hmm.
or other information from us. That's all there. And yet you can reach out to us, ask us questions, find out
Fantastic.
more about us and what we do and
Yeah.
how we can help you.
Yeah. As a developer myself, I can only encourage developers,
Yep.
designers, website developers, test
Mhm.
with NVDA at a minimum. And there's other
Absolutely.
things you can do as well. Definitely contact me if you want to find out. Just some simple tricks that you can do that is going to get you on the, and we're calling it the digital accessibility movement.
Mhm.
NVDA is used, I don't know how many countries now in the world, but many, many countries in the world.
We
And it is,
conservatively say over 250,000 users in at least 175 countries and over 55 languages. It's been
yeah,
translated into as well. And excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat.
yeah,
And we also, that international community as well. So there's 55 languages that NVDA interface has been translated into.
mm,
But I know, for instance, some of the synthesizers that you can use NVDA with, eSpeak,
mm,
is a popular and I'll say somewhat contentious sometimes one.
mm,
It's not the most human sounding one, but it is available in something like 125 different languages.
wow. And that's it. It's all about people being able to communicate, read the information in a logical order, making sure it is readable, accessible, because everyone loses, well, not everyone, most people do end up with some form of sight issue as they get older. And
Yeah,
this is a tool that you can use. It's only as good as the amount of testing that's done. Quentin, thank you. I really
it is.
appreciate your time. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, review, share. We really do love feedback. And I keep saying, even the ugly stuff. And yeah, we need to know. And don't forget, even the vision stuff, I can't actually see really well. So having someone say, Oi, that guest, perfect. That's great. Feedback's always good. And we'll see you next time on the Digital Access Show. Have a good week.